All right, we are live. How is everybody doing today? This is Randall Slifer. We got Josh Townsend and Owen in here. We are discussing scheme fits for the Baltimore Ravens and the Buffalo Bills in late May because we cannot stop talking about football. Josh, how you doing?
Good to be back. It's been a while since draft season's ended. Took a little bit of a layoff off, but we're back in full swing, getting a little preview on the 2026 class as we stand in summer scouting, but really focusing on where these teams stand. A lot of rookies, a lot of free agency moves have been added, a lot of coaching changes have been added too. We're starting off with the mainstay teams, the playoff provincial, like the Super Bowl contenders. We're going to start off with them, but once we get deeper into this, you'll start to see how each team is broken down and what they're trying to do schematically in their season to give themselves the best chance.
Yeah, and Owen, how you doing? We missed you, Josh. Hi, Owen, how you doing?
Good. I'm actually really excited. These two teams are covering the Bills and Ravens. They actually played twice last year. So, in my kind of preparation for this, I watched back both those games on the All 22 with the NFL Plus. So it was kind of a well. The first game for being the Bills fan on behalf of this wasn't too much fun.
Yeah, you watched
Second game was more fun. I'm sure it wasn't the opposite for Josh here, but yeah, I went back through and watched the ball just to kind of see how they reacted to each other, knowing how both teams kind of build their stuff out, and we'll talk about that obviously. But it was interesting to see the two different dichotomies of those games.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, Bills kind of evolved late in this season last year, so then you kind of saw a different change of pace and kind of threw it off a little bit. But yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to break down scheme fits based on position. We're going to go through it, and let's start with the Baltimore Ravens. Let's lead off with there, and then we'll start with the front seven. Josh, if you want to take off.
Yeah. So mostly when you think about the Baltimore Ravens defense, there's two packages that they run. We'll get into the Bills. They are like the most heavy nickel team that I've seen with my own eyes. But the Ravens do incorporate about 50% nickel coverage. So 4 down linemen, 2 inside linebackers, 5 defensive backs. But their base is a 3-4 defense where they have 3 interior defensive linemen, a nose tackle stuffing up to 0, 2 outside linebackers, 2 inside linebackers, 2 safeties, 2 corners, just a preference on. But the Ravens have a really interesting mix of interior defensive linemen, headlined by Justin Madubuike, who's improved steadily as a run defender his whole career, but really makes his name on third downs. Had, I think, a sack a game if you go back to 2023 for over a 3-month stretch where he absolutely turned it on, made the Pro Bowl, got a $20 million contract. His production went down a little bit this year, but he is their go-to guy on third downs to get pressure from the interior. And when we're talking about their run defense in 3-4, Travis Jones and Broderick Washington are going to be the guys you see mostly on the field. Last year, Michael Pierce will also flip-flop with Travis Jones and Broderick Washington as a little rotation when they line up in the nose tackle, and Broderick mostly as a 3-eye technique. But this year, Michael Pierce retired, so we're going to have to see guys like John Jenkins step in. Also, more Aeneas Peebles, the 5th-round pick, who is really has a great opportunity to really earn some snaps right away week 1 in this rotation. Broderick Washington and Travis Jones, while they are solid, both run defenders, both do their job greatly. Broderick Washington, more of a guy that can do a lot of things well, but nothing spectacular. Travis Jones, more of a potential guy, shows flashes on third downs, but really is a double team merchant, taking on those double teams as a nose tackle, really solidifies that interior defensive lineman for them. So it's going to be interesting how this depth develops. I really don't trust John Jenkins. I really think Aeneas Peebles is going to earn a starting spot sooner rather than later. But if you have a complaint there, the depth is a little bit lacking for them. You can't say the same about these outside linebackers, though. There's genuinely 6 outside linebackers that could get about 60-65% of the snaps, and they would be more of a serviceable starter. Started off with Adafe Owe, a guy that had really high potential when they drafted starting off. Really put it together last year, getting 10 sacks, I believe. Always been a solid run defender, athletic, contains the edge, can move crazy, but really got home more often this year. Not the highest presser percentage, but when he did get pressure, he was able to finish, which was really encouraging to see. And Kyle Van Noy, out of nowhere, has been a timeless wonder for this team. With a guy like Tavius Robinson, Adisa Isaac, David Ojabo, Mike Green, who we'll get to in a second, Kyle Van Noy has stood out the most and really been the best pass rusher for the Ravens at an age 33, 34 year for him. He got a 2-year extension, good on him. But really, if you talk about it, probably one of the most underrated edge rushers, period, in the league, just because he doesn't have amazing get off or he won't wow you in any athletic ways. He's a really technical rusher, and his football IQ is off the charts, always is in the right position to make a great play for them. So you're confident with those two as your starters. Mike Green makes this really damn interesting, though. Fell to the second round for obvious off-field concerns, but if you turn on the tape, this is a top 5 edge rusher in this class. Personally, for me, it was the top 3 edge rusher, probably the best pass rusher off the edge for this team as it stands right now. How many snaps he'll get to start off will be really interesting to see. How often does he play on first and second downs? While he is a good run defender at the college level, it will take him a little bit of time to get those first and second down reps, just because with all the depth in front of him. Tavius Robinson, for an example, 5th round guy coming out of Mississippi. Nobody expected much of him. Hasn't really done much on third downs, but been an amazing run defender for this team and has earned a lot of snaps on first and second down. So we'll see how Mike Green integrates himself, but you still got Adisa Isaac, 3rd round pick out of Penn State, David Ajabu, 2nd round pick out of Michigan, both on their rookie contracts. So that's 6 damn decent edge rushers that can make a great rotation for them. You don't have to worry about your depth there. You also got Kameen Rucker, the undrafted free agent out of North Carolina, see if he can make the team. But you like where the edge group stands. You don't like the depth of this interior defensive lineman, but with how strong Justin Madubuike has been and their run defense overall, there's not much worry with this team, which you'll start to see when we talk about all the positions for both the Ravens and the Bills. There's not much worry on both sides of the balls with these teams.
For sure. And then to clean up those stats for you, Madubuike had 11 sacks on the interior, which is very impressive, with 11% pass rush win rate. You're right. Kyle Van Noy had 14 sacks at 12.5%. And then Owe had 11 at 11.5%. So Van Noy was on top of there for sure. So what's the archetype like? Mike Green getting drafted more or less was probably he passed the interview and it was a BPA at that point. But what kind of trend do you see when they're drafting those edges or those outside linebackers?
Well, you really don't see the Ravens draft anybody in the first round at the edge position. So they're looking for the next best available in the second and third rounds. Adisa Isaac was a different scenario. He's more of a stockier build, better run defender. But mostly, if they're looking for third down penetrators, they're looking for the long, athletic, quick get off, good pass rush technique type of guys, able to win in multiple different ways. They don't like one-trick ponies on the Ravens. They like hand usage, inside counters, being able to win off of a dip, just straight speed to power. They're looking for a lot of versatility and somebody that's not going to be a liability as a run defender. They're not going to take on complete projects. Like when they drafted David Ajabu in the second round, he was a great prospect. The only reason he fell was injuries, and it's been hard for him to crack the rotation. They didn't draft a potential guy there. Adisa Isaac, a really good run defender. They didn't draft potential off of there. They're looking Tavius Robinson, for example, no pass rush upside, but amazing run defender. So they're looking for guys to contribute right away in their specific roles, whether it be a run defender first or a pass rusher first.
Most definitely. That makes sense. Yeah. And, when it comes down to it, as a Buffalo Bills fan, and Owen can relate, is anytime that the Eagles or the Baltimore Ravens get up to draft, we roll our eyes because every time it's a good draft pick and it pisses us off. And then when it comes to inside linebackers, you want to talk about some inside linebackers because you guys utilize your linebackers well, tough, have decades and decades of good linebackers for you guys.
Yeah, decades on decades. And our defensive coordinator was former inside linebacker Zach Orr, former second team All-Pro, retired early due to injuries, immediately jumped in the coaching staff role and took over to DC, I think 6-7 years into his coaching tenure. So everything is based off of these inside linebackers. And this is where I'm a little bit concerned where I'm the Baltimore Ravens. Roquan Smith, we can talk about him all day. We don't have to. In my opinion, he had a little bit of a down year, especially when we talk about the back half of the year for the Baltimore Ravens. Roquan has that potential to be the best inside linebacker in this league outside of Fred Warner, and he just wasn't that to finish the year. Still a great starter, the leader, the dot, the guy that he's a top 5 inside linebacker in the league. There's no question about it. We can go on and on about him, but this inside linebacker 2 spot is really interesting for me because you lost the depth with Patrick Queen and Malik Ham in the past 2 seasons, and now you're relying on Trenton Simpson to make that jump. I don't know if he's there yet. I trust Zach Orr because of his track record developing linebackers. Trenton Simpson didn't take the step we expected this year. Hopefully he takes it next year. There's a lot of flashes like hard worker, hard nose, relentless, great motor. But if you're able to get that football IQ on there and make him at least a better run defender, being able to take on blockers at the second level, being in the right place at the right time, wrap up tackler, not missing easy tackles. There's a lot of highlights on his tape. It just hasn't all come together for him. And the only other comfortable linebacker I like on this team is Teddy Buchanan, the 4th round pick out of California. We covered him back in November, and he was one of the day 3 guys that I fell in love with at the inside linebacker position. And I think Eric DeCosta and Zach Orr all saw the same thing when they made him their first selection in the 4th round. And I think there's a real chance he starts day one for this team if Trenton Simpson isn't there yet for them. Reliable, great motor, everything the Ravens are looking for in a player, play like a Raven. Teddy Buchanan fits that mold. He's a damn good tackler too. But the depth outside of that concerns this, what out of me. I really do not like Jake Hummel on this roster and everybody else that follows behind it. Losing Patrick Queen and Malik Harrison's going to be tough for them just because all the pressure's on Roquan. You don't know if Trenton Simpson's there yet. We can hype up Teddy Buchanan as much as we want, but he hasn't proven anything yet. Everything falls on Roquan as it should be. He's the highest paid player on this defense, but that depth really does concern me if I'm the Baltimore Ravens.
For sure, yeah. I mean, you guys definitely got to steal with Teddy I mean, that Cal Pro Day was basically him shining that whole entire time. And then, you had about 28 teams looking at him for sure. And then, of course, then we'll go to the back end, and then we'll hit the Buffalo defense. But let's talk about your DBs. Taking it, you do have a wide range of DBs in the back, especially with Kyle Hamilton being such a beast and larger framed guy. So talk about your DBs as well.
Our defensive back room is really interesting because really we can do a lot of different things with our nickel and our base defense. Kyle Hamilton, we've all seen the development he's made. He's a top 3 safety in this league. Whatever you want him to do on the field, he will do it. He can line up as a star linebacker and dime, as a nickel and nickel defense, as a straight back safety and a base defense. He will do everything exceptionally well. High football IQ. He's going to get paid a lot of money here coming up soon. And that's sad for our cap, but I digress. Malachi Starks being the first round draft pick for us is going to be very, very important for us. I was a little bit down on Malachi Starks compared to consensus. Nick Manowari guy myself, but I'll probably bite myself in the ass for that in the future. He is in a perfect situation right next to Kyle Hamilton. He's not asked to be the starting nickel for this team. Marlon Humphrey takes that spot. He's able to play that free safety role, being able to roam that deep third of the field, making a recovery ball on a deep ball. And if you need him to come play inside, he's more than capable of doing that. He showed that this year at Georgia, even though he had a little bit of down lapses in his film when he played that. He showed you the versatility right then and there. Marlon Humphrey moving to the nickel was the best thing for this team. We started off terrible in pass defense for our first 6 weeks of the season. I think we were the 32nd team in pass yards allowed. It was really bad. Zach Orr was on the hot seat. We moved Marlon Humphrey over from boundary to nickel, and he's an all-pro at the nickel position. Not the force fumble merchant that we all know once knew him to be, but an amazing cover guy, sound tackler, smart, high football IQ, goofball off the field. But if he produces like that on the field, it don't matter. You can't say anything about it. And Nate Wiggins was a really good pick last year for the Ravens. We had genuine concerns with Brandon Stevens as our next best cornerback. Nate Wiggins eased his way into the starting role, but once he got that role, he didn't look back. Speed merchant for days. He can press up at the line for somebody that's as skinny as him. He's an adequate tackler, let's be real, but that's a place where he can improve on. If you're asking just to straight cover a guy downfield one-on-one in man coverage, Nate Wiggins had, I think, a top 5 pass grade in the past 6 seasons. You can quote me on that. I saw something on my feed about that. But Nate Wiggins was an amazing draft pick nonetheless. And our next best corner is going to be Chidobe Awuzie. I can't say that name for crap. But Cincinnati Bengals corner going over to Tennessee last year. Everybody that signed with Tennessee last year had a shit year. So gets released. We get him on a cheap 1 year, $1 million deal. Eric DaCosta does that thing again where he gets a good guy for nothing. And he's going to be our third corner and asked to play that boundary role. For a guy 2 years ago coming off of borderline Pro Bowl year, you're more than fine with that as your CB3. And you love the depth that's been addressed in this cornerback room. TJ Tampa, Bilal Cohn in the 5th round, Roger Longerbeam in the 6th round. 3 really good depth pieces for this team will contribute on special teams. And if you need them to spot start some snaps, they're more than capable to do that. All 4 of those guys, I believe. When you talk about the safety depth, though, it scares the shit out of me. Sanusi Kane, 7th round pick out of Purdue last year. More of a special teams guy for that pick, but now is the 3rd best safety on this team. With Adarius Washington tearing his ACL, you will not see Adarius Washington at all this year. And Bilal Braid, the undrafted free agent out of Maryland last year, who I like more than Kane, but still, if you're asking those guys to be the spot starter at safety, if Hamilton or Starks go down, that concerns the hell out of me. Look for them to sign a veteran in free agency, bring somebody in to be that 3rd safety for that team. But besides that, there's a lot of different things you can do with this defense. Put Marlon at boundary, put Marlon at nickel, put Kyle at nickel, put Starks at nickel. You can really flip or flop this anyway. And they put themselves in a great position not to do what they did through the first 6 weeks of last year, giving up the most amount of yards in the NFL.
For sure. So what I was looking at, like with this draft, with Cone and Longer Beam, and Starks didn't have the great 40, but when you're looking at actual cornerbacks, is speed, how much do they prioritize speed in there?
Very much so, just because of how this league has been built around. AFC North is kind of tricky because you're not seeing that many teams expand the field except for the Cincinnati Bengals. Everybody's a run-first mentality team. So they're all still trying to fit that play like a Raven mold, high football IQ, good character, hard-nosed, relentless motor type. But in the 5th round, you saw it with TJ Tampa last year. They're drafting a long, athletic, rangy cornerbacks with a lot of potential. Jalen Armour-Davis 3 years ago prior to that. Bilal Cohn still fits in that mold, was one of my day 3 gems just because of all of his measurables, his speed, and his ability to cover man and zone. Robert Longerbeam, he's going to be forced into that nickel role, smaller guy, but epitomizes to play like a Raven mold, hard-nosed, physical, will get in your face, plays relentless. They are looking for relentless motors on this team. So when we get into week 15, we get into the wild card, we get into the playoffs, everybody still has the same motor they were playing with week 1 when all the jitters were out on the table. So they're all looking for the same mentality. I think the corner room, you're just looking for the best player available on day 3 when DeCosta's attacking that corner and safety position. But I really do like TJ Tampa pick last year and the 2 picks they made this year in the 6th round.
I agree. I like the Longer Beam draft pick personally. He sneakily had like a mid-9 RAS when he for the combine. Like, he's an athlete. He is an athlete for sure. So yeah, so that makes sense. I mean, again, anytime you guys draft, I roll my eyes. So you guys have the good formula. Let's
real quick. So
Yeah.
Josh, was it when the Ravens were that poor pass defense last year? Was that when Hamilton was their primary nickel player and they were having him?
Yeah.
And then they finally moved him back to true safety, and then that was when they kind of started flexing Humphrey back and forth between the slot and the outside, correct?
Yeah, but it still took a couple weeks after we moved Hamilton back to that deep safety because Marcus Williams really had a down year for us out of nowhere. He was really good through his first 3 years of his contract, and then by PFF grades, he was the worst safety in the National Football League for the first 8 weeks. It was to the point where we had to healthy scratch him and force Darius Washington into that spot. And then once you saw Darius Washington get on that field by like week 10, I believe, then you saw everything come together for the Ravens. And then Marlon Humphrey getting damn comfortable in the nickel position.
And then, so the Darius Washington injury, I believe it was after the draft, right? He got hurt during training. So with that understanding and the fact that they drafted Malachi Starks in the 1st round prior to that happening, what do you think their plan was initially with having Darius Washington? Their defense obviously played better with Hamilton at true safety, and then you had another player. Well, Hamilton could play in the slot. Humphrey was getting comfortable in the slot, and then you have a guy like Starks who maybe he's not playing over Washington or Hamilton, but he could also play in the slot to get snaps. What do you think their initial plan was prior to the Darius Washington injury, which now Starks is going to be their starting safety because of that?
I mean, in the Ravens scenario, unless an interior offensive lineman like Tyler Booker, Gray Zabel, or Donovan Jackson were on the board, I think safety was the play no matter what. There was a clip of their whole draft room they released on YouTube. It was them deciding between 2 different guys, and John Harbaugh has South Carolina game film on the screen in the YouTube video. You can take that as you will. Ravens fans have put the puzzle together. They were debating between Amamori and Starks, but I think that's what the decision came down to the whole time. If the Darius Washington was healthy, that would have made things so much better for Malachi Starks year 1, just because you don't have to force him into that starting spot. You can move him in different places. You can try him out at nickel even, and if you want to move Marlon back. There's so many things you can do with Malachi Starks on the field if a Darius Washington is healthy. Now that he's injured, torn ACL in training, like you said, he's going to be forced to be that free safety, play that one high shell, cover 3, or be the boundary guy on cover 2 and cover 4. So it's just more where they're going to be able to, what they're going to be able to do with Malachi Starks year 1. But Darius Washington was on a 1-year restricted free agent tender no matter what. So I think it was safety all
Bad
the way.
idea. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, Malachi Starks stepped into the collegiate season like freshman and started doing things. So I wouldn't be surprised if he does in the NFL either, to be honest with you. Any more questions, Owen, for the Baltimore Ravens defense?
Not much. Other than I was going back through their front seven, and Trenton Simpson being a guy who's going to be like more traditional linebacker. I was kind of surprised seeing that, especially after watching his film for I think it was the 23 draft was when he came out. I was surprised because a lot of his best plays were when he was used as like an attacking piece, being more. And I thought being drafted for the Ravens would be kind of a similar situation where they had with a Van Noy or Odafe Owe, where you're this more off-ball linebacker build, but you succeed well as a blitzer, being able to rush off the edge. So I was surprised to see he wasn't utilized more in that, and they're trying to mold them more into their traditional off-ball middle linebacker type style. But I do think that kind of goes to show, like, okay, they like having these multiple linebacker type builds where they can be edge rushers. So if they want to put Trent Simpson on the edge, they still have the option to do so. But they also have a Van Noy, they have an Odafe Owe, they have Ojabo in that level, on that level of the defense where you don't really know who, when they come out, if they're going to be dropping coverage or they're going to be coming. So it's something that interests me a lot as someone who likes to study defenses and understand like how different teams attack it, where you have such multiple fronts. Usually you see that a lot with the front four, how multiple they can be, but the Ravens like to go multiple with their second level to be not really, you can't really tell where the pressure is going to be coming from and who's going to be sent where.
Beauty of a 3-4. All right. Let's hit Buffalo defense. Owen, we'll start with our front. Our front's I would say obscure, but changing.
Yeah, they definitely went through the process of adding to that. That was one of their biggest weaknesses, and it's been kind of one of the things coming out of every single failed postseason run is the defensive line didn't do much. In the past, you saw them going and taking big swings in free agency with Von Miller, on top of developing and drafting guys in the first round like Greg Rousseau, and with their first picks like AJ Epinesa. This year, they went back to the well of drafting with grabbing TJ Sanders in the second, and you got Deone Walker in the fourth from Kentucky, as well as Landon Jackson in the third for the edge grouping. For the Bills, the way I would describe their defensive tackle styling, a lot of the conversation heading to the draft was they wanted to get, Kenneth Grant, 330-pound, big nose tackle. Everyone was clamoring for a nose tackle to be the eventual replacement for Daquan Jones as the one tech for this defense. And they told you, like, okay, Daquan Jones plays between that range of 310 to 320. That's where we like our bigger guys. And they added in TJ Sanders. Deone Walker is a different story because he's 6'7", 360. He's kind of an enigma for what they've run on that front. But for the most part, you have penetration-style gap shooting D tackles that are going to disrupt the blocking schemes, trying to get upfield and attack those gaps, and then create kind of a mess to allow the linebackers to move through that and have some more space to work with instead of taking on blocks and hoping that they can hold the blocks long enough to prevent them from getting to that second level. So for their D tackles, you've got players like Dwayne Carter, who's also in that 305, 310 range, could be a quasi one tech, even though most teams wouldn't really see him as that. You have Ed Oliver, who's a sub 300-pound D tackle. TJ Sanders around that 300-pound limit. So you have players that their biggest bonus or biggest trait is that they can get upfield and attack. Ed Oliver is a little bit better when it comes to using leverage and winning with his hands as a pass rusher. But a lot of these players that they're investing in are going to be players that can get up the field and can create that disruption in the interior of their defensive line. So I do think that that's their archetype they want to go to. Even though most people were clamoring for the big body guys, and a lot of defenses do run that, they've shown that they're interested more in one techs that do have more mass than, say, a sub 290-pound Ed Oliver. But they're not going to have a guy who's out there that's 330 pounds and can't get upfield as well as they're really expecting to. They don't want to have a lot of what they do change because they like to sub those players in and out. So if you're subbing in a guy who's 330 and then comes in a 310 guy and it's totally different play styles, now your linebackers are reacting differently. They want to be able to keep it kind of uniform. So I think they showed us a lot with that this past draft cycle. And then moving to the edge, I think the word to describe the archetype they like there is compression style rushers. Long-limbed, heavy hands. You think Greg Rousseau being a guy who, he was a converted safety to edge rusher, but he didn't really have that juice or bend to be like this crazy outside speed rusher. He has some of that in his game, but a lot of it is using his length, using his upper body strength to get hands-on and compress that angle to rush towards the quarterback. You also saw that when they drafted AJ Epinesa this year with Landon Jackson. But they've splashed a little bit when it comes to having players like Javon Solomon, who they drafted last year, got some snaps towards the end of the season, and then bringing in Von Miller initially to bring in that kind of off-ball pitch where they're bringing a guy in that doesn't do what everyone else does and can kind of create some different mismatch opportunities. But a lot of what the Bills do is be compression style rushers, cage rush, make sure quarterbacks can't leave the pocket, and then slowly condense and allow their interior pass rush to get upfield and be the ones who are doing the attacking, whereas the DNs are more responsible and controlling their blocks than the D tackles themselves.
Yep. I mean, pretty much nailed it at that point. And I would say I would probably, and Owen, correct me if I'm wrong, that this draft is probably the nail in the coffin for nose tackles for Buffalo, because I think most of the fan base or the analysts knew that we never go that route. Daquan Jones and everybody behind, even Kyle Williams, and way back when and things like that. He was a smaller guy. So I think, would you say that this draft is like the nail on the coffin that while we have Brandon Beane, we will never get a 330-pound monster, like a beefy one. Deion Walker, again, is that kind of outlier because he can rush onto 5-eye. He's more of a versatile defensive lineman. But do you think that nail is set of that true nose tackle, 330-pound for Brandon Beane?
Yeah, I think they added Star Lotulelei when they first took over this roster, and he was similar to that, but he was still like 320 and less. He wasn't like, he was a typical nose tackle, but he wasn't like those big, massive human beings you see like a Travis Jones for the Ravens or Kenneth Grant who's coming out this season. They were always more interested in having guys who can still move while being able to be kind of a quasi block eater. So you went Star Lotulelei, then went Daquan Jones, and then this draft, where you see Daquan Jones in his last year of his contract, he was not the same player last year as he was in previous years. And there was a kind of glaring need for them to add a player to replace him. And they went with players that don't fit that typical archetype. And that's really what kind of signaled what you said, that the nail in the coffin for them to ever really go for that stereotypical route, at least in the short term now. I'm sure if their philosophy evolves in the future, it could change. But right now, I don't see them ever going with a player that's going to be like 325, 330 plus and trying to take up 2 blocks at a time and not be able to shoot gaps like that. They're much more interested in causing disruption up front, allowing their smarter linebackers to clean up and take advantage of that than have someone who makes the blocks have to deal with them double team at first.
No, yeah, I agree for sure, and that's okay. But because I do TJ Sanders is a dog. In the first couple practices, he's been in OTAs, he's been shown out and things along those lines. So can't complain, especially with our sustained success for both organizations here, Ravens and Buffalo. All right, so get into the linebackers then, because our linebackers have lots of roles.
Yeah, so you've seen an evolution, kind of like we were talking about with the D-line earlier with the Bills. You've seen evolution with these linebackers, especially this past season, where they went into it having Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard be their starting 2 linebackers. Bills run a 4-2-5 with a nickel and Teron Johnson, so they only ever really run 2 linebackers. The reason I wanted to watch the Ravens game specifically is because that was when they started to run a bit more 3 linebacker sets, especially that playoff game. And you saw them now having a player in the caliber of Dorian Williams coming off the bench, being able to run a couple more of those sets there. But typically they're running 4-2-5. In the past, it was Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds, where Tremaine Edmonds was this more typical, bigger, 6'5", 250-pound Mike-style linebacker who can move, had some blitzing capabilities, and is more of your typical stack and shed type of guy, or at least had the outfit to be that. Where Matt Milano is more of your matchup-style linebacker, able to play good in coverage, has the athleticism, converted safety to linebacker in Boston College. And he also, was a good blitzer, able to capitalize on that, but it was more so with understanding blocking schemes, timing it, and finding the space as opposed to stacking, shedding, winning as a pass rusher. So you have Matt Milano, who was more of a matchup style linebacker, smaller, not going to take on blocks, works well with that front where you have disruptors, and it creates kind of this chaos in their interior 3 where then they can read and attack the space they now see and read off the running back. And then you have now Terrell Bernard, who's also a matchup style linebacker. So I think that's where, if you're going to put a label on what kind of linebackers the Bills have tended to look for, is going to be matchup style linebackers as opposed to your traditional Mikes or run fits, run defenders with stack and shed ability. We're going to see Terrell Bernard, also a good blitzer in the same way Matt Milano is, where he's able to time his blitz as well and still impact as a pass rushing down player, but good in coverage, athletic, smart, able to understand and read that defensive front and offensive line confusion and attack it in that way. So you don't have a lot of guys that you're going to trust to take on blocks that get past the first line, get off and make tackles. You're trusting these guys to play more in space and use their high intelligence, athleticism to impact the run game, and then also be difference makers when it comes to matching up with tight ends, running backs in the passing game as well.
For sure. And what is your prediction for our nickel to 4-3 base for 2025? And what are your thoughts on Dorian Williams in that aspect? I personally am a Dorian Williams fan. I like his size. I think he's a hard hitter. I think we need that in our offense. I don't think we need to move to a 4-3 base, but I do think we need to evolve into a more versatile 4-3 slash 4-2-5.
Yeah, I do think so. Teron Johnson, what makes him one of the best slot corners in the NFL is his ability to fit the run and defend the run, despite being 5'9", right, a smaller level player. You really need that to play a defense in a base that is nickel, especially with Teron, having Teron Johnson be out there and be that's other second level defender. In those games where they had him come off the field and they put Dorian Williams in, it was against teams like the Ravens that went with a lot of jumbo sets and needing to fit more holes, and they know they're going to be running down their throat with bigger backs and bigger ball carriers. So for me, I think Teron Johnson being that good of a run defender outside of injury, I think they're not going to stray away from the formula that's worked so far to this point. But I do think having Dorian Williams is going to allow them to fit into that 3 linebacker set a little bit more frequently than they have in the past, where they really haven't had the bodies there when it was Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds. I'm a big Dorian Williams fan. Matt Milano is my favorite Bill probably ever from my time watching. I absolutely love him. I'm a big linebackers guy. I played linebacker. Yeah. Absolutely love linebackers. And he's been always my favorite player to watch. But with his progression, his inability to stay healthy, and kind of just losing a step over the years, him moving on after the season and Dorian Williams coming in, Dorian Williams is a level of player that makes me confident that if he steps in, you're at least not losing anything from where Matt Milano is currently. So he's a good player. He's another one where I'd consider him a matchup linebacker, where even though he runs around, he does like the lay to wood. He can put some bodies down. I don't think he excels a lot when it comes to taking up blocks and extending and getting off and taking things on physically. He just doesn't have that size or mass to him. He does like to fly downfield, work in space, and use his speed to his advantage. So I think the Bills are showing another trend there with their third linebacker, eventual starter down the road, of being more matchup linebacker players at their second levels, specifically working in space, working off those fronts and trying to attack that way, as opposed to having your Josie Jewels, your Tremaine Edmonds, your stack and shed middle linebacker run stuffing guys.
For sure. I love that. And then another one that's changing as we evolve is our DBs as well, getting Maxwell Harrison in the first round, getting Dorian Strong in the 6th round. Our safeties are, I wouldn't say out of place, but we're still trying to figure out who they are. So talk about our DBs, talk about the safeties and cornerbacks kind of separately, what you're looking for and trending.
So the Bills scheme is kind of like that the Vic Fangio style, where they're running a lot of 2 high shells, whether it's cover 4, cover 2, cover 6. They're going to run where they're always going to give you that 2 high look. And then what made in the past the Bills really good was their safety duo with Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, that it prioritizes on high intelligence over everything. I think in the OTA presser, Sean McDermott mentioned how with Cole Bishop, their upcoming safety they drafted in the 2nd round last year, that what he needs to do is kind of understand it and get more mental reps and understand where he can cheat and where he can play more loosely and freely, so that way once he understands mentally where he needs to be and what the different coverages are covering where, he can start playing more loose, fly around the ball, and try to make some bigger turnover where he plays. So you're running a defense that's preventative. You have soft shells off your safeties there, and whether or not it's going to be rotated down, you have corners here or there. It's a lot of communication heavy stuff. But they do run traditionally like a true free safety. I think Taylor Rapp could fit that role. We also have them bring in Derek Forrest. And then you have more of your strong safety role. Cole Bishop in the past, Damar Hamlin more kind of fit that role. He was a tweener between the two. But someone who, if you saw that with in the past with Jordan Poyer. I think that was their ideal setup, was Poyer and Hyde. Hyde was more that middle field roaming safety who would be able to take away the ball and cover if you do run to like a cover 3 or a cover 1. And Poyer, who always consistently had like 100+ tackles on the season, able to buzz down, play lower coverage shells, and then as well be able to impact the run from their 3rd level as more of an attacking player. So they do like to have that balance. They haven't really had those true archetype players back there. At least this past season they didn't. I think Cole Bishop projects more into that strong safety role, and if you have Taylor Rapp or whoever else, Derek Forrest, be that more free safety roaming player in the backfield there, as long as they're on the same page. Again, the most important thing for them is IQ, because the Bills like to rotate their players a lot and manipulate what the pre-snap and post-snap coverages look like and are telling the quarterbacks specifically, so that way you can get that confusion. And then with your corners, you're oftentimes going to have them in a shallow cover 2 look. If they are in their cover 4, they're dropping back to the deep. And then if those wide receivers try to take it deep, it basically turns into man coverage down there. So that's where we saw, like in this pass, where the draft philosophy kind of followed what they did in 2022, where they took Kyrie Elam in the first and then Christian Benford in the later rounds in the sixth. They have an archetype of players that they like, who are smart, understand their own responsibilities. Maybe they're not the best athletes, but they are willing to come up and tackle and attack, and they have some ball skills so that they could to get some ball takeaways there. When they're communicating well enough and they're on the same page zone coverage wise, they'll be able to take some more risks. They know where they need to be. So you see players like that with Christian Benford this year with Dorian Strong on top of taking an athletic freak, and Maxwell Harrison ran that 4-2. So they're kind of taking another swing at that. Harrison, I believe, is a more fit to run heavier zone schemes despite being more athletically gifted. So it's fitting more into the archetype they like of players who are stronger tacklers. I think Harrison's tackling is a bit underrated at this point with how much people are hating on it. But zone instincts, ability to take the ball away and collapse on either catch points or receivers who have the ball in their hands. And then again, it's a lot of communication back there. You have Teron Johnson, who is this roaming kind of over the middle of the field zone coverage drop player where you have your linebackers in communication with him. So there's a lot of mix and match. It's heavy zone coverage. I think even with Maxwell Harrison being a more athletically gifted player, their swing to man coverage is only going to be marginal at best from me personally. I do think he still works best as a zone coverage corner. And what makes his speed so useful to this defense is the fact that he can collapse on those throwing lanes a lot quicker than other players in the past have been able to, and get some more of those takeaways, get some more high variance plays. So their whole schematic objective is players that will limit big plays with tackling and responsibility, but also they don't really take a lot of swings and upside, which you've seen with the Christian Benford, Dorian Strong picks, players that have started for them, Dane Jackson in the past, but still want to be responsible and know what they're doing.
For sure. I love that. Yep. And then to like almost blend it all together, because the Ravens and the Bills are all both very good teams, which, as Owen mentioned, we played the Ravens twice last year. I expect to play them twice this year as well, sort of in this situation sort of thing. But what they do is they look for A, BPA, and B, defenses will stick with a scheme and a scheme fit, but we're also drafting to be a chameleon on a per game basis. So where's your matchups? How can you adjust in your depth to be able to play towards the strengths or weaknesses of the other team to make sure you excel? And that's kind of where at least the Bills are at for sure. And Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, if the Ravens do that as well.
As well, yeah.
Yeah. You know, Maxwell Harrison, speed, so we can cover man against the Chiefs. And then our linebackers with Dorian Williams to switch on 4-3 base when we're having trouble defending the run on bigger guys like Derrick Henry. We're bringing in Dorian Williams for that and things along those lines. So that's great. All right, let's move to the offense. First, we'll go offensive line, and then we'll do skill positions all together, and then we'll skip quarterback because we just draft dogs. so we'll start with Buffalo. Josh, talk about our amazing offensive line and how we operate and what we do.
For Buffalo?
Oh, and I'm sorry. Yeah, do Buffalo first.
Yeah, you got
to do defense first.
So with the Bills, especially in the past, they've kind of taken stabs at every kind of player. You've seen them go with the former tight end turned tackle and Spencer Brown. You've seen them go with Deion Dawkins, who was projected to be a guard, ended up playing left tackle for them, being one of the best in the league, who takes these weird shorter sets, being able to get hands on quickly, isn't like the greatest athlete at the tackle position, but makes it work. And then you also see them go with, so you're thinking, okay, maybe they like more mobile guys, maybe some smaller players, but then they go and they draft Osiris Torrance, who's massive power run blocking guard. And then they've constantly kind of filtered through and tried different styles of players at the positions and rotated through. Their bookends have always been those tackles, especially this past 2 seasons with Spencer Brown taking that next step and evolving into one of the better right tackles in the NFL, Deion Dawkins being stable over there. And they've been able to filter through some of the players in the middle 3, moving on from Mitch Morris, going to Connor McGovern, having David Edwards there. They have a bunch of players, even looking at their depth, that there's a mix of former rugby guys and super high upside athletes, but also some lower end kind of safer draft picks, like a Cedric Van Pran Granger, who maybe isn't super versatile or athletic, but he's a good player at center. Like they have a good mix, and they take a lot of different stabs because they do like to run a lot of mix when it comes to schematically, both in the run game and the pass. A lot of stuff that I notice they like to do is more of that zone style offensive and running. Speaking specifically on the running backs, they have a good variety of between power, receiving ability and slashing, more explosive players. So they do like to incorporate a lot of different elements to that, where they'll run zone, allow James Cook to read the front, make good cuts and get upfield and use some of that burst to get some upfield advantage. But they've also dabbled with a lot more tackle and guard pulling, especially this past season for kickouts. You've seen that when they do QB power. Ray Davis this past season brought a power element to their offense. They were kind of looking for bringing in Latavius Murray and Damian Harris in the past. They do want to incorporate some of that power running as well. But for the most part, especially since James Cook's been their lead back, a lot of what they want to do is stretch that defensive front out and allow him to pick his spots. And you see that with having the athletic tackles and Spencer Brown. Deion Dawkins can move laterally well enough. And then you had Mitch Morse for a long time, who was a lateral moving center. Connor McGovern's not too bad at it as well. And then even though Cyrus Stearns, who's more of a power style blocking guy, has shown to be able to survive in that system. And then when they do need more of a power running scheme, they do run behind him. They run behind some of their bigger hitting guys. Spencer Brown also being one of those guys who was pretty powerful up top, big guy. So they do like to mix and match that. I do think they tend more towards the zone than man or power run blocking, but they're pretty even across the board when it comes to that. And then pass blocking, I think they either are the top or one of the top teams in the league when it comes to just having 5-man protection fronts. They don't bring in tight ends or running backs often to help with pass blocking. When they do, it's every so often. Usually you'll see it with like Ty Johnson. But even then, they like to get their backs and tight ends out into the pass sets and having them be options for Josh Allen, especially because he is so mobile and he's able to use his legs to avoid pressure. They let up the least amount of sacks last year in the league. So they've been a good pass blocking team just because they do have good communication, they've even with turnover they had in the interior offensive line last year, they do have some good consistency with their tackles. Connor McGovern was a starter guard, became a starter center, and you had Osiris Torrance been his second year after being a rookie last season. So you do have some consistency there. Josh Allen helps out the offensive line a lot when it comes to pass blocking, but they do oftentimes just want it to be, you need to be able to pass block, 5-man fronts, know what you're doing, don't have no mess ups. You need to be good mentally, and then they'll also just take swings on different styles or body types of offensive line, depending on what the draft class is really looking like that year.
For sure. I love that. And how about the Ravens offensive line? I know you guys picked up pieces this year as well to get depth based on injuries and things along those lines. So if you want to talk about the Ravens offensive line.
So we all know that the Ravens mentality ever since we drafted Lamar Jackson and had Greg Roman, our former offensive coordinator, at the helm, is to attack the gaps, the A and B gap, just a primarily heavy gap running team using Patrick Ricard as the joker of all jokers in the NFL. Line him up wherever you want as an inline tight end, outside line tight end, fullback, H-back at times. The ultimate chess piece when you talk about our run blocking scheme. Patrick Ricard has a lot of credit for that, just with his versatility, how strong he is at the point of attack, and he can catch some balls as well. So he is an all-pro for many reasons, the best fullback in the NFL, in my opinion. But it's a non-negotiable to be a heavy point of attack interior offensive lineman and at least a solid point of attack offensive tackle for this team. If you think about Ronnie Stanley, if you think about Roger Rosengarten, those aren't guys that are going to be able to maul people off the line of scrimmage, but they're going to be able to hold them at the point of attack and not let the edge rusher collapse down into the A or B gaps when we do run those heavy gap schemes out of our shotgun formations. Derrick Henry obviously was the bell cow for this team, so that's going to be a calling card for him. But you got to give Todd Monken a hell of a lot of credit. He could have just ran 70% gap plays and nobody would ever complain because you have Derrick Henry right behind Lamar Jackson. But he damn well incorporated inside and outside zones from both the gun and the pistol. The read options that they were able to run this year, it took a substantial leap with Derrick Henry back there with Lamar Jackson year one. Being able to move Patrick Ricard as well pre-snap from one side of an inline tight end to the other side of the field really opened up the RPO game for us as well. But just the ability for Todd Monken not to be one-dimensional and run 55% of our plays out of a zone concept, mostly inside zone, some outside zone is incorporated. But like we've mentioned, the stronger our interior offensive line is, that's where we like to force most of our runs, whether it be a duo, whether it be inside zone, whatever the run scheme may be, everything likes to be directed towards the inside. And it all starts with Tyler Linderbaum, the amazing first-round draft pick from Iowa. He's due for a contract extension coming up, and he deservedly so. A top 3 center in this league, really holds it down for our 2 guards who are very interchangeable the past couple years. We are like the Buffalo Bills, where we like to rinse and replace, don't really like to re-sign our second-year second contract guys or rookies coming into their second year deal. We like to rinse and rotate. Last year, it was Daniel Falalele, the 6'8" monster, filling in at right guard for whatever reason. It worked. I don't know how. It worked, and somehow he got a Pro Bowl out of that. He wasn't Pro Bowl worthy, but he was damn sure solid enough at the point of attack, and his leverage wasn't that much of an issue playing that right guard. So he'll take that spot again this year. Definitely a solid to adequate starter, but a mauler off the line, whether it's double teams, one-on-one, can really run behind him. And Andrew Voorhees is taking over that left guard spot, filling in for Patrick McCary, who was really our swing tackle / backup offensive lineman. Wherever there was a hole on the starting lineup, Patrick McCary would take over that role. And last year, he started at left guard for us, solid, moved over to Jacksonville, I believe. I might be mistaken, but Andrew Voorhees now moves into that spot, 7th round draft pick, was projected top 100 pick, but torn ACL at the combine, bumped him all the way down to the 7th round. Hence, Eric DaCosta did that thing again, taking a damn good player where he should not be. So he'll fill in 2 years later, see how the development is. Ben Cleveland is a guy that we missed on, but it's going to be asked of to play this year. It's not a case where, okay, you can be our 53rd man on the roster, and worst case scenario, yeah, we can put you in. No, Ben Cleveland is going to be asked a lot of this year if one of these guys go down. Off-field concerns, had a couple DUIs, been out of shape. Not really the best draft pick that Eric DaCosta has ever made, but there's going to be a role for him on this roster, whether we like it or not. And Garrett Dellinger in the 7th round will be competing for that guard spot. You can also move Emory Jones in there, the tackle, who we're going to try at tackle for the first year, I believe. Obviously has guard potential. And let's say Falalele gets injured or Andrew Voorhees isn't working out and we need a last-minute option, we'll probably go with Emory Jones, look for his name, really strong, powerful guy, not as good on his feet as Rosengarten or Ronnie Stanley, but a guy that I really liked coming into the year. And even though he had a down year, I still like the potential he has as only a 21-year-old offensive lineman. When you talk about pass pro with this team, we are really, really finesseful when you talk about our offensive tackles. If you think about Ronnie Stanley and Roger Rosengarten, they're not powerful when you compare them to, let's say, Deion Dawkins or Spencer Brown, for example. They just don't have that power element in their game. They're able to anchor, but they're not able to stiff people with their hand usage, really just create power and leverage from their base, but their footwork is both really damn good for offensive linemen. Can mirror shadow, can really just get in the way. And for a quarterback like Lamar Jackson, who doesn't need that much damn time in the pocket, they're amazing pass blockers. And Rosengarten really was impressive this year for them. Their first 2 weeks, Rosengarten looked like a guy, yeah, he needs to sit a year, he needs to develop, but his fluidity in his hips and him being comfortable after those first 2 games, facing against Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, he had to grow up pretty quickly in the AFC North. So his development through the middle and the back half of the year was really impressive for the 2nd round pick with a lot of power concerns. And for our scheme, you don't really need to be powerful as an offensive tackle. We asked Linderbaum to take the brunt of the load when talking about protection schemes. Lamar Jackson also helps out when sliding protections, but Tyler Linderbaum is very much the vocal leader when it comes to pass blocking. Falalele being an absolute, it's 350 pounds, 6'8" right guard. There's not much you can do against that unless you have just amazing leverage off the line of scrimmage. Our left guard spot is going to be really interesting, though, to see if Voorhees does step in to be a solid starter, because that's all the Bills and the Ravens are asking for our interior offensive linemen, to be solid, to do their job, to be high football IQ, and let our tackles do the work.
Absolutely. Yeah, I did like your draft picks and Dellinger. I love Carson Vincent and with that as well. And then you're right, as I looked, Derrick Henry through A B gap was about a little over 55% of his rushes were A and B gap. So that was nail on the head there. And then, so I guess since we're talking about the offensive line, Owen, if you'd like to start with the running backs and then hit tight ends and wide receivers, let's do that all in a group. And then we'll move on to the Ravens after that. So talk about the pass catchers and the rushers.
Yeah, so we're working inside out, running backs and out. So for the Bills, they usually run about 3 different backs. They'll roster 4, including fullback Reggie Gilliam, which I didn't really incorporate into their offensive line discussion because he's kind of hot or cold whenever they use him. It gets more towards the colder months and towards the end of the season. They want to start running some more of that power scheme system, they'll put him in there more and just they can develop into more of a smash mouth run football team if they want to, because they have the bodies there. But for the most part, Gilliam is just a pure special team guy, and then can take occasional snaps when it comes to pass blocking or run blocking. When it comes to the running backs themselves, obviously James Cook is the leading back in that backfield there. Took him a few years to finally take the reins of the starting job. He was competing with Devin Singletary his rookie year. They brought in Zach Moss to complement him. And I think them bringing in Zach Moss and now Ray Davis and Ty Johnson kind of explains what they like to do with their backfield. James Cook is explosive, can move really well, loose hips, but he's a sub 200-pound back. Like, he's not going to be an in between the tackles power style runner. Then you have Ray Davis, who's like 5'7", 5'8", 200, 210, but really dense built frame, can still move a little bit, but is going to be more of your in between the tackles runner, able to carry some guys and break tackles. And then Ty Johnson runs hard, another guy who is around that 200-pound weight limit. I think he's 5'9", 5'10", not the biggest guys, but he's a natural when it comes to using his hands and pass catching. Ray Davis and James Cook both also are natural pass catchers. I think James Cook is a little bit of a letdown from his college days, where he was like thought of to be like a really high upside pass catching back. Hasn't really seen that, and which is why I think there's the whole dispute about his contract right now. But you saw a lot with last year. Ray Davis and Ty Johnson really contributed with their pass catching. I was listening to a different podcast today, and they were talking about the target distribution to running backs, and the Bills were like 28th or 30th when it came to their percentage of targets that went to running backs, but they were 5th in the amount of yards that running backs gave them in passing. So they're super efficient when the running backs do get used in the passing game, and they do like to use them on so often, and it becomes more so when Josh Allen can find them in the check down spots. They don't really run a lot of screens.
Because we're awful at it.
Yeah, a lot of short passes to the running backs. They just never get it going there. Which is weird. I don't know.
It's also on Josh too. I feel like Josh panics at that time too.
Don't get me started.
It's been like 4 years that the Bills fans have been yelling on radio stations and everything about why don't we run more running back screens, and they just haven't done it. I mean, it didn't hurt, I guess, this past year, they've never had that under McDermott. Any offensive coordinator they had never had that running back screen game down for some odd reason. But moving out to the tight ends, you have Dalton Kincaid, third-year man, first-round pick back in 2023. You'd hope – I have had such high expectations for him because I thought he could be a volume pass catcher, especially with the style of player he was coming out of college, coming out of Utah. Super relatively new to football. He didn't really play football until I think it was like his senior year of high school. He was mostly a basketball guy and then played both sports in college before transferring to Utah, becoming more of a high upside tight end prospect in that draft class and being a first round pick by the Bills. Dealt with some injuries last year. I think he had like fluid in one or both of his knees, suffered some injuries and knocked him out of games, and then played through the majority of both knees there for the rest of the season. So him and Josh Allen weren't on the same page a lot, whether it's because of injury hampered Kincaid or just didn't have the chemistry because he missed games. Kincaid was one of the best separators as a tight end last year when it comes to the advanced metrics there. It just was him and Allen just weren't able to connect. He was also I think either number top 5 or even maybe the number 1 tight end when it comes to targets uncatchable thrown his way compared to tight ends. So there's something there with chemistry with him and Josh that needs to come down, but I don't think it's a lack of talent for Kincaid. Then you have Knox, someone who lacks no chemistry with Josh Allen, one of his best friends on the team, got paid probably because he's one of his best friends on the team. And another example of players we've talked about so far were like Greg Rousseau transitioning from safety to edge, Dalton Kincaid, basketball player, turned tight end. We'll get to another one, Keon Coleman. But Dawson Knox was a quarterback turned tight end, Spencer Brown also tight end turned offensive tackle. They love grabbing these project players who don't have a lot of time on task at their chosen position and then have that kind of built-in upside because they're transitioning to a new position. I do think Dawson Knox is a lower upside receiver. There was some hope that he could be a guy that blossomed a bit more, but he's kind of settled in his role as a good tight end too, can be a good blocker at times, can also have some bad blocking games, isn't super dynamic as a pass catcher, but is consistent when it comes to working over the middle of the field, attacking the seams, seemingly makes the hard catches look easy and the easy catches look hard, but that's always been kind of his issue since he was a rookie. So he's a solid hand when it comes to tight end too, maybe getting paid a little heavy for a tight end too there, but with him having Kincaid, if Kincaid can stay healthy, you'd be pretty happy with him with his role he has in the offense. And then this year, they swapped out Q Morris, who was an ERFA, who ended up just leaving, going to the Lions. They bring in Jackson Hawes, another guy who's going to bring a high blocking element. They're a team that transitioned away from being a spread 3 wide receiver offense to more of a 2 tight end to a 12 or 11 or 12 personnel as opposed to 11 personnel when Joe Brady took over. And they got to a little bit more with Ken Dorsey as well. But as soon as Joe Brady took over, they became a team that ran the ball the 5th most in the league and threw the ball the 5th least in the league. I think Josh Allen averaged a hair under 30 attempts per game last season, whereas the running backs got a lot of work. And you saw that reflected with James Cook. And they're bringing in a guy like Jackson Hawes, low upside receiver, plays hard when the ball in his hands, but isn't super dynamic as out in the route and can just bully guys and dominate there. So maybe with them adding more of a move blocking piece and having some more Reggie Gilliam, they could get a running back screen game going, but I'm not holding out any hope for that. Yeah. So I don't expect Jackson Hawes to impact the stat sheet a lot, but he's the type of player where they had a niche role. They have their pure receiving tight end in Kincaid. They have their kind of midway man in Dawson Knox, and now they have their true run blocking tight end 3 in Jackson Hawes. And then we talk about transition. This wide receiver room has undergone one of the biggest transitions across the league in the past 2 seasons. They went from having Stephon Diggs, 150 target guy, holds, I think it's a single season receptions record for the Bills, is on the Bills leaderboards for receiving all across it in this 5 years he played here with the Bills. And then he leaves, goes to the Texans, and you have only Khalil Shakir being a wide receiver on the roster who had ever caught a pass from Josh Allen going into last season. You added in Keon Coleman, again, another basketball player turned football prospect, Michigan State turned Florida State. You brought in Curtis Samuel, more of a gimmick touch, speed option, lateral quickness kind of guy. And you really relied on those 2 tight end sets. You also had Matt Collins be more of a special teams guy who could chip in every so often. What I think the Bills look for, they don't necessarily want that high volume player that's going to be either on the outside, inside, doesn't matter. Someone who's going to get 150 targets funneled towards it. Their whole mantra is everybody eats. And you saw that last year. Khalil Shakir led the team in targets, and I think it was still sub 100 targets, maybe just over, counting the playoffs. And I see that being the same thing there this year. I think Khalil Shakir is going to lead them in targets, and he's more of that slot type body, probably the most consistent player, especially with his hands. So I think he's their best value when it comes to a higher volume of targets there. Dalton Kincaid's going to chip in with a good amount of targets as well. And then you see a lot of specialization from the players they want to go after. So you have your big body threat in Keon Coleman, who's going to excel in contested catch situations. So a type of player who doesn't need a high volume targets to succeed in the way you want them to. Similar with Justin Palmer, more of a route running type of guy, but still also a big body, a guy that you're not looking to dominate as a wide receiver 1, 2, maybe even as a wide receiver 3, but someone that you're looking to win against specific matchups, be a matchup player, another type of player that doesn't need a ton of volume to be effective for your offense. And then you have Elijah Moore and Curtis Samuel, whoever wins out in that battle there, to be more of the speed option, gimmick touch guy. Elijah Moore can do a little bit more than that, but I think Curtis Samuel, being on the team for longer, has the inside track there. But again, another role where you don't need a high amount of volume of targets to impact the offense. And so this team who doesn't throw the ball a lot, 5th least in the league last year by percentage of plays, and you have a bunch of players that don't need high volume to impact the game. They do each individual role specifically. You can then have an offense that whatever situation they're in, they know what their matchups are. They know what type of skill set they have on what type of skill set the defense is providing them, and they can target whatever they feel like is most comfortable for that situation. So they're not going to take your number 1 wide receivers in the first round. They're going to look to get some more specialized guys later on, and we saw that with this past draft and the draft before, where they traded out and went for more of a low volume but specialized targeting Keon Coleman.
For sure. And I like 2 off seasons ago, Brandon Beans initially started talking about building your wide receiver room like a basketball team. And he never really did that from 2018 to 2022 or so. But the last 2 years, you could tell he's building it like a basketball roster, starting lineup sort of thing. So I do love the route that he's taking there. And then, anything other than that, then if you're a tight end and you want to play for Buffalo, you have to have an old Western name. And Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, Quentin Morris, Jackson Hawes. That's pretty necessary apparently. And then the one question that I have for you, Owen, for those depth, do you see any similarities in trends on running backs? I think James Cook was an outlier, but you could make comparisons in Ray Davis, Devin Singletary, and Zach Moss. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think Ray Davis and Devin Singletary are definitely super similar players. The question with them was top end athleticism, being able to break plays long and have deep speed, but they have more of that jitterbug ability to make guys miss and still having smaller, dense builds to be able to run between the tackles. I like Ray Davis a bit more than Devin Singletary personally, just because I do think he offers more of that power element, but that definitely correlates. And then talking about that power element, you got Zach Moss, who was supposed to be more of this power run style coming out of Utah's offense, run between the tackles and pick up those short yardage plays to complement James Cook and Devin Singletary, who are seen as more of guys you want to get on the edge and in space to be able to complement their skill sets. So you do see them wanting to value that skill set specifically, but they also want to value having that home run hitter when it comes to either James Cook, who they drafted, again, an outlier when it comes to higher drafted running backs they've taken, but they've invested, UDFA or lower round draft picks into guys like Darrington Evans, even Ty Johnson to an extent, that have some of that more deep speed and breakaway speed that you want to see in your big hitting. And even if your power back is now your lead back, you want that as your complement, as opposed to what they have right now, where your explosive back's your starter, your power back's your complement. And they also, having Ty Johnson there, I think they'd rather have his skill set spread between both or one of the guys who are more starting caliber players in Ray Davis and James Cook. But because he's so good at what he does and he's significantly better than either of the other guys at that, I think Ray Davis may have the potential to get there eventually as a receiver. But between pass blocking and being able to just affect the game on a third down basis, I think they have no other choice than bring Ty Johnson in, just to bring the full back complement together and have that committee totally rounded out and not have anything they're missing or want to add to their offense in that position.
For sure. I annoyed everybody when I said Ty Johnson was RB3, like depth chart wise, the best one out of the NFL by gap. Ty Johnson was so reliable on a constant basis as a third running back. Like anytime I saw him on the field, I got excited. So it was great. All right, let's flip over to Baltimore. All right, let's start with running backs. We know, dogs at running back, so hit it.
So you'll see a lot of similarities when we talk about the Ravens offense and the Bills offense. I would say our running back room is more centric, like our rushing game is more of a primary than the Bills, so to say, even though they are a top 5 rushing team in the league. I think the Ravens are number 2 besides the Eagles. I think the beauty of the Bills offense is, like you said, everybody eats, and Josh Allen can really beat you from all 3 levels of the field, whether it's quick game, intermediate letting passes develop, off scramble deep throws, in pocket deep throws, rushing. The Bills have everything at their disposal, and the Ravens are so close to getting to that point. But I will give our running back room a little bit of an edge. I'm not talking about depth. Your guys' depth is absolutely better. But when Derrick Henry, you cannot say enough about the man. Really, we thought a little bit of a decline would happen with him coming in, not being asked to do as much with Lamar Jackson right next to him. No, identical numbers to the past 3 years that he's put up, even better than his last season with Tennessee. Timeless wonder, second best running back in the NFL. No need to go on to that. But this depth is a little bit concerning to me. Justice Hill, an amazing third down back. His health is a question mark. Keaton Mitchell, really explosive 4-3 type runner, really can incorporate those outside zone concepts with Keaton Mitchell. We can't really do that with anybody else on this roster. Keaton Mitchell is the guy we can do that with, and he's coming off of a really substantial injury, easing his way back into the last 4 weeks of the season last year. And Rasheen Ali was a 5th-round pick who hasn't produced much so far, and I thought was one of the few blemishes on Eric DeCosta's draft picks the past 3 years, but the verdict's still out on Rasheen Ali. But when you talk about the depth of this class, not the class, between Buffalo and the Ravens, Buffalo definitely has the edge in the running back room, but Derrick Henry is just that much better of a runner that you have to give a little bit of a slight towards them. And of course, Lamar Jackson, when you're comparing Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson's rushing ability, it's not even close. Still the top 3 rushing quarterbacks in the league, top 4, top 5, whether you give or take with Josh Allen. Amazing rusher in his own right, but the way I thought about it earlier, 8 or 9 defenders are keeping their eyes on Josh Allen at all times on the field. The back half safeties or the boundary corners, they'll probably focus on their man. Every defense that faces Baltimore, all 11 of them were focused on Lamar Jackson before Derrick Henry. And now Derrick Henry is there. It is just that much of a headache for teams to game plan for, even though the concepts are so simple that they run it. It is so effective. I think we were 32nd in pass attempts last year, but we have more than capable receivers and tight ends to contribute to that. I think we were a top 5 passing attack in the league. I might be mistaken on that, but our efficiency was damn good. And it's all centered around our tight ends. Mark Andrews has been a Pro Bowler year in and year out. Another guy that's really good at a lot of things, doesn't excel at anything, a red zone merchant. We all saw what happened in the back half of the season for him especially against Buffalo. That's a whole conversation in itself because you got a damn good athletic playmaker like Isaiah Likely right behind him, just sniffing at the wing. Not as good of a blocker, but probably a better receiver, better yak guy, better getting in and out of his breaks. Just overall has a better feel when it comes to pass catching than Mark Andrews. It's going to be really interesting to see in the next couple years which one of them say, which one of them go. I got a feeling Isaiah Likely is going to get the money. Mark Andrews is going to get shipped out. But both an amazing tight end duo to have a problem with that. And for more of our blocker type, you guys, I really hope you play Jackson Halls this year, like as much as you should, because he's just that much. He's that good when you're talking about first and second down being a blocker. He will be amazing for you guys. We got a little bit of a version of that with Charlie Kolar, more of a goofy, big body, just hard nosed football player, likes to run people over. Even if he's not the most technical guy, he's probably our best blocker, and that's where he gets the majority of his snaps. He'll get a little bit of receiving rep from Lamar Jackson just because a lot of his first reads, especially over the middle of the field, are quick to get out to the tight ends, whether it's Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, whether he's working an intermediate route or a sit down route. And especially in the red zone, his eyes are on the tight ends more than anything. So those are going to be Isaiah Likely, Mark Andrews, another crucial part of this offense. That's going to be the focal point in the passing game. Zay Flowers will move into the wide receivers. Zay Flowers is one of the most underrated wide receivers in the NFL just because he's a smaller guy and doesn't make those contested catches. What he does pre-snap, what he does post-snap, yards after catch, really good hands for a guy his size, can line up and play as a boundary receiver, even though he's asked mostly to be a slot receiver. I think this is a 1,000-yard guy we're going to see year in and year out, and really has unlocked pre-snap motion for the wide receivers for the Baltimore Ravens. The way they've used him in so many different facets, fake jet screens behind the line of scrimmage, quick motions into the slot position, motion him out, has really opened up the Ravens to the more modern passing game instead of what they were all centered around when Lamar Jackson first came in. And Rashad Bateman has been that really cool Z receiver to be the number 2 to Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers likes to work after catch, short, deep passes. Rashad Bateman is the one-on-one man coverage beater, that intermediate merchant. Did a study with him with the Scouting Academy and going through that whole process, trying to learn what the process is like to scout position by position. And you really saw the technical nuance in Rashad Bateman's stem of his route, his ability to get off the line of scrimmage, his long arms, being able to make a bunch of catches outside of his catch radius. He really didn't have that rapport, kind of like Dalton Kincaid and Josh Allen didn't have that rapport with Lamar Jackson, but you started to see it come together for him this year, especially in the back half of the year. And Eric DeCosta did a great move, signing him to an extension early when his value was down. Now you got a really good wide receiver 2 for this team, a team that's not asking their receivers to do as much as half the league is asking their receivers to do. You got them at a damn good contract for the next 3 years. So that's where they're centering their passing attack around. And for whatever reason, the Ravens just love to sign 10-year veterans to play a wide receiver 3 to get 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. It was Odell Beckham 2 years ago. It was Nelson Aguilar last year. And this year, it's DeAndre Hopkins 3 years too late. Awesome. I love to see all these guys come to Baltimore. Steve Smith, even if you want to throw it back that much, I think he was more productive than any of the guys we previously mentioned. But DeAndre Hopkins will now be that 10-year veteran receiver to take over that wide receiver 3 role. And we saw his role diminish last year with Tennessee, and then going into Kansas City, they barely asked anything out of DeAndre Hopkins. You won't see that in Baltimore. You will see him on the field about 50% of the snaps and get about 4 targets a game, in my opinion. He will be used more than he was used in Tennessee, being a wide receiver 1, which is scary to think about with Tennessee last year. But I digress. He will be a really good wide receiver 3 for us. It's a 1-year rental, in my opinion. We're not going to re-sign him after that. So we're going to have to see where the development on Devontae Walker is. We're going to have to see if LaJohntay Webster can actually turn into a wide receiver piece instead of a just returner piece for us. The depth besides of that, it's not, none of those guys will make the roster. Tylan Wallace is an unsung hero for us, whether it's on special teams and as a wide receiver 4. I think he will be the wide receiver 4 on this team until Devontae Walker takes his spot. And that's a big question mark for me. A really athletic guy, showed flashes before he transferred to North Carolina, had a little bit of a down year with them. We took him best on the best player available mantra, taking those athletic traitsy wide receivers, and it hasn't come to fruition last year. We'll see if it comes to fruition this year, but Tylan Wallace is a great great benefit to have with developing a guy like Devontae Walker. So I love how comfortable our receivers have gotten in this Todd Monken system. Now you'll see them really start to flourish and thrive if they stay healthy. And let's see how much production we get out of DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, we brought Odell Beckham back to life for the last year that he had in him before he kind of tampered off into trying to bounce team from team. We got the last bit of Odell out of the tank. I think we can do the same with DeAndre Hopkins. I think Isaiah likely takes a bigger step than we even thought. Just a great pick in the 4th round. Being a wide receiver, a tight end 2 for that team, playing that role to perfection. I think he has a chance to be the tight end 1 sooner rather than later on this team. And that just speaks to how good Isaiah likely is, not how bad Mark Andrews is. Mark Andrews is still a top 12 tight end in the league, whether you get him at his worst or if you get him at his best. It's a Pro Bowl tight end, always fighting for the All-Pro second team with his production to start his career. So you love where the receivers and tight ends are finally at, and you love how comfortable they are in Todd Monken's system now.
For sure. And that was actually going to be my question with you is, do you think at all that there is a chance that the depth chart gets switched into tight ends throughout the season, potentially with Isaiah Likely taking tight end 1? OTA chatter, they're talking, Isaiah Likely was talking, and so was Harbaugh. They asked what Isaiah Likely's future was, and he said all pro. And tight end 1, you got to be an all pro or tight end 1 to be an all pro. Do you see it all that kind of switching out throughout the season? Or is it more or less like we're throwing all our chips into Mark Andrews, please work out, and then if it doesn't, then they pull back?
I think you started to see them sheer away from putting all the chips in Mark Andrews, especially when we're not going to put too much stock into the drop. Okay, he dropped a damn 2-point conversion. It cost us the game. There were many other factors that played into that, but everybody's going to highlight that and say, oh, Mark Andrews is washed. No, he's not washed. He's still a damn good tight end in the NFL. We're just speaking to how good Isaiah Likely is.
100%.
In and out of his breaks, just being he's kind of like Harold Fannin in a way, just really funky with how he moves in and out of his routes, but damn productive, more athletic in my opinion than Harold Fannin, ultra productive. I think you're going to see Mark Andrews still demand that red zone threat more than Isaiah Likely. I think Isaiah Likely is going to be that corner route merchant, being able to take those in breakers and break it for 15 or 20 yards after catch, kind of being a XY receiver on some snaps, so to say. If they want to run streak routes, he can absolutely body a guy out and get separation downfield, which is awesome to have in a tight end too. I think Mark Andrews will still demand the red zone threat, but you also have to play the salary cap into it. This is a business at the end of the day. Mark Andrews is making upwards of $20 million. Isaiah Likely is going to have to get paid in the near future. And if you extend him now before he takes the jump we all expect him to, it'll be cheaper on the cap and it'll be easier to move off of Mark Andrews in the future. So it's really unfortunate for him. And it's not just because of the drop, but Likely's coming, and he's coming soon.
For sure. All right. Well, yeah, we're about an hour and 10 in. We'll finish it off. We'll talk about each other. And then if you want to finish off with Owen, what player I guess none of us would take the QB anyways. What player would you take from Baltimore? And then Josh, what player would you take from Buffalo? But also first lead off with where everybody can find you, what you're doing now, what we can read, watch, whole 9 yards. Owen, if you want to start.
Yeah, so I'm over on Twitter and on YouTube at Weekly Huddle or Weekly Huddle Podcast. I've been posting a lot. I've been working together with some of the other draft professors here, like Newt, who's been dropping his summer scouting videos. I'm going to be having a video with Bill soon. Bill Sparks is going to come on and we're going to do a 2026 mock draft based on the playoff predictors I just ran recently. So have some good content over there. Obviously, I'm going to be on here. The draft professors, we're talking about the different schemes and trying to figure out how players fit and how to tag them more properly for the Draft Professor website. But also on Mondays, I'm going to be jumping on and doing the school-specific breakdowns of players for summer scouting, kind of getting some preemptive scouting notes out there for specific schools, players. I think this upcoming Monday, we're doing Clemson. Following that, we're going to be doing one of the other schools, I think probably a Big Ten school. And I did just suggest to Jim today that we do a whole primer episode on the MAC as an entirety. I worked in the MAC. I want to give my guys some of the love, and I also had a couple MAC players last year come out that I did absolutely love. So we're hopefully gonna have that in the cooking in. And then when the fall comes back around, me and Newt, we were on Thursdays last week. This year we're gonna be on Wednesdays talking about defense tackles and edge rusher prospects. So if you're interested in that, come back around when it comes closer to college football season.
I will do my research to be on that Mac pod if you'd like me to be on that, Owen. That sounds like fun, to
Of
be
course.
honest. All right, and then who are you stealing from the Ravens?
So this is tough because the Ravens always draft players I really like coming out. Like you guys have
Taking
this
a
is
rookie.
none of these are my answers just because like there's players I'm looking at your depth like I liked Rasheen Ali coming out. I like Charlie Kolar. There's a bunch of players I'm looking at, I'm like, oh, I remember really liking those guys when they're coming out of this draft class. But I think I'm torn between two. Okay, so because there's two players that I absolutely loved as well. Kyle Hamilton was my number 1 overall player in that draft class, and Tyler Linderbaum was like my 4th overall player in that draft class. For me, I think it's going to be Kyle Hamilton just because the Bills don't have that true safety, and he also could be like if they run more big nickel, that'd be insane to have Kyle Hamilton as the big nickel in the Bills. And we do have Connor McGovern. Can't really complain about that. I think Linderbaum is a better player than Connor McGovern, obviously, but I think for me, a player I would steal would be Kyle Hamilton for that Bills secondary.
Yeah, that's me too. All right, Josh, talk about yourself and then who you stealing from the Bills.
Yeah, so you guys can find me over at Twitter, juice_T23. I haven't been as active recently. NFL draft just ended, so I took a little bit of layoff from that, but we'll be cycling back in again this fall, going over with Jake, whatever. I haven't looked at the position group we're going to have, but we're going to be on every week talking about those prospects. You're going to get a little bit less content from me, be a little bit busier in the fall. We got something coming up. But you'll still find me on Twitter posting my opinions on these draft prospects with film to back it up. You'll catch me every week here on the NFL Draft Professors podcast. And really do give a follow to Weekly Huddle and Newt, especially. Those guys have been putting a lot of work into summer scouting and they're going to give you guys the best content that they can give you, and probably the most informal content that you'll get on any app. So make sure to check them out. We'll be around weekly with this and then going into the fall with summer scouting. But you're going to hear a little bit less from me, but I'll still be around.
All right. Who are you stealing from Buffalo?
So from Buffalo, it's not their best player because I could go Deion Dawkins. I can go.
That's what I thought you were going to go.
I'm not going to go Deion Dawkins. I'm not going to go Ed Oliver. I'm going to take Terrell Bernard, which is really interesting because he was a 3rd-round guy, wasn't asked much year 1, but when he stepped into his role, he filled in the Matt Milano role as good as he could, and he did a damn good job at it. He would be the immediate linebacker, too, for us, and he would take a lot of tension off of Roquan Smith, which is all that we're asking for out of our backup inside linebackers and our weak side linebacker. Take some pressure off of him not to make the play every single time. Terrell Bernard, smart, instinctive, can cover, really does everything well, and is always in the right place at the right time, a sure tackler. Really turned into a leader for that Buffalo Bills team as well. You started to see him come out of his shell a little bit once he got comfortable. He's a damn good inside linebacker that doesn't get talked about enough, and he would fit on a lot of different NFL teams as their linebacker 1, but he'd be an amazing linebacker 2 to Roquan.
For sure. Yeah, Terrell Bernard is like a litmus test for ball knowers. If you don't think he's good, then you do not know ball. At Randall Slifer on Twitter, you can find me, and then I'm doing all my stuff with Draft Professors. I'm a little bit quiet. I'm not quiet on Twitter, but I'm a little quiet in the podcasting because I am building my boards. I'm trying to get 400 people locked up before September so that I can focus on some NFL tape before that and after that. And then I'll be podcasting with Draft Professors as much as I can. And then you can find my writing and some podcasting. I'm part of NFL Draft Central with Team MBS Media. So teammbsmedia.com. You can check out my writing and some podcasting there as well. And that is it for the day. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate everybody watching. Thank you, 181 of you that are just as crazy as us. And we will be here next Wednesday, correct? I don't know what teams we're doing, but we will be doing scheme fits for the next 2 teams. We'll send out a flyer for who we're doing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good night.